jumping around a little bit this morning, so we're not going to be just in one text. Just kind of weird for me to say that, but that's the plan this morning. As we're going to be beginning our second study in the promises of God and looking specifically at God's promise for us to have everlasting joy. I remember when I was younger, I dated Jenna for about 5 years before we got married. And there was a lot of excitement and anticipation waiting for that day to come. And it finally came, and we didn't really have jobs. We were pretty broke. I had some money set aside from, just preparing. She found a part-time job, and I was working kind of part-time, and I still had school to go. I didn't finish college yet. So we rented a little house that didn't have central heat and air, and we moved in together after getting married, and made it through a few months of school and trying to find work, and God blessed us, and I got a job working for the government as an engineer. It was everything seems to have been working out as I had hoped. And we actually moved out of that house, moved into another house, bought our own house. We bought a car, 2004 Honda CR-V. And, everything seemed to have been lining up just as I had planned it, just as I had purposed. God had blessed us so much. But there was some issues that were going on in our life. The house payment was a little stressful. The car we had buyer's remorse over after buying it. If anybody knows what that's like. And as wonderful of a wife as Jenna was, I was still dealing with issues of selfishness, and she's an amazing wife, but she's a terrible God, which is kind of what I had made her into, and it just didn't work. So there was some emptiness inside. I was not very satisfied, though everything seemed to have been working out just as I had originally designed it and intended it to be. So I sought to find joy in other things. We bought a Jeep Wrangler, and I was going to find joy in the Jeep Wrangler. I fixed it up. I made it big with, the big mud tires and everything. I fixed up a truck. Our dad had a old 82 Chevy, put a new engine in it, learned some cool things about that. That didn't really scratch the itch either. There was still some emptiness there. So sold the Jeep Wrangler, bought a new Jeep Wrangler. Oh, that's going to fix it, right? Well, guess what happened? Buyer's remorse again. Didn't learn my lesson. So there was still some struggle that was going on, and all the while, we're not getting along some because of there's selfishness and things like that I'm dealing with and learning about. And I'll say this again because it's Valentine's Day, not because of her, but primarily because of me. There were issues, and it's the truth. She just made a terrible God, which is kind of what I made her into. And so did the Jeep Wranglers, and so did the duck hunting with the duck dog, and all these different kinds of things that I was reaching out to try to find some joy and satisfaction because everything worked just as I had planned it to, and it still didn't fill me. I was still empty. And I didn't want much, right? I wasn't one of these people that were seeking to be the most famous or the most wealthy or anything like that. I just had these plans and these things that I was looking forward to, and I thought if these things would all work out, then I would find the joy and the satisfaction and the pleasure that I was looking for, but it wasn't there. Maybe some of you can relate to this. I know as I was struggling through that, I found a passage that really hit me in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 7, Solomon, after trying all these different kinds of things, said, "Behold, this is what I found," says the preacher, "while adding one thing to another to find the scheme of things, which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I have not found." He says, "See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. The picture throughout Ecclesiastes is it's all vanity. He's seeking out a scheme. He's seeking out something where he can go to find an endless flow of joy and satisfaction. And he says this is what man is doing. We're seeking out schemes that will provide us with the joy and the satisfaction that we're looking for. And we're not finding it anywhere under the sun. So he says, I commend some things. I commend joy. It's good to be joyful. He says in chapter 8, verse 15, man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. He says, it's good to be joyful. You'll take those things with you, those memories. Those are good. And it's good also to enjoy the fruit of your labor. And the fruit that comes out of it, it's good to enjoy your actual labor. In chapter 9, verse 9, he says, enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun. It sounded good at the beginning, and then it's like vain life. Because that is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. It's good to be joyful. It's good to enjoy the things that you have. But Solomon's picture in the book of Ecclesiastes is not that you can find the everlasting joy that you're looking for in any of those things. You're seeking it like I was seeking it, and it's just not going to happen. And as we start to open our mind up to think about other people and what they've been desiring and seeking after, we see that it's as though there's a black hole inside of us. That no matter how much stuff or good things we put into it, it never fills up. It doesn't matter if we have all the power over the whole world and all the riches over the whole world. It will not satisfy what's inside of us. That black hole will just eat it all up and leave us wanting more. It just does not work. And as we pursue those things, as we make our stuff our gods, as we make our spouses our gods, as we make our children our gods, as we make our jobs our gods, our houses, whatever it is, as we pursue them as though they're going to give us that, we end up destroying joy that we're trying to create. That's been my experience. Maybe that's been yours as well. But did you know that there is a solution? Solomon settles for temporary joy in his book. He says there's nothing better under the sun than that. Though he says it's important to fear God and keep his commandments, he has a perspective of God in the book. There's something more that is available to us that Solomon didn't really know about when he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. It was promised a few years later in Isaiah 35. Isaiah 35 is a really interesting passage talking about the promise of God. And it talks about there being this desert, and it's kind of a weird picture, but there's this desert, and he is going to make a highway in the desert. In verse 8, it says, and a highway shall be there, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it. It shall belong to those who walk on the way. Even if they are fools, they shall not go astray. No lion shall be there, nor shall any ravenous beast come upon it. They shall not be found there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads, and they shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. We actually looked at a similar idea in Jeremiah earlier this morning, a picture of joy that God wants to give his people. In Isaiah 35, it actually literally says that he's going to give his people, the redeemed, the ransomed, who come to his city through the highway that he creates, the highway of holiness, he's going to give them everlasting joy. He's going to pour it out on their heads, and they're going to obtain gladness and joy as they come through the way of holiness. This is God's promise. Okay, this sounds good, right? That sounds pretty amazing. But what does all that mean? Who are these redeemed and ransomed? And how are they going to return to Zion and sing and not have any more sorrow? And who is this really about? Well, as we've been looking at in our Bible class, these promises are made to Israel, but they have a reference to the messianic hope that is being offered to those who are in Christ. Now just imagine what life would be like to have that emptiness fully satisfied, to have everlasting joy poured out on your head, to have gladness and joy all the time, and no more sorrow and no more sighing all the days of your life. Picture throughout this chapter is that God is making a way for that to be a reality. He's setting up a path in the wilderness, a highway that leads to that everlasting joy. In the desert, there's going to be growth and vegetation and everything's going to be made right. It says the eyes of the blind will be opened, the ears of the deaf unstopped. The lame is going to leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. All the problems of life are going to be taken away, and everything's going to be fixed, and life's going to be right. Life's going to be good. Wow. That's an amazing promise found in this text. But will it ever be fulfilled? Is it fulfilled? When we come into the New Testament, what do we see? John the Baptist comes bursting on the scene in every gospel. And what does he say? What's his purpose? To prepare the way. To make the path straight. For the one who is coming after him. He's preparing the way that has been talked about there in Isaiah 35. The way of holiness, as it's referred to. The way of everlasting joy is being prepared by John when he comes onto the scene. In John 1:23 it says, he says, I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. This is his exact purpose, to provide the way of everlasting joy for his people. When we come to John chapter 14, we read these words from Jesus in his last teachings to his disciples. This is what he tells them. He tells them at first, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? It's kind of a beautiful picture of Jesus saying, I'm going to the Father's house to prepare a room so that you can live with me forever. In verse 6, he said to them, I am the way. They want to know where he's going and how to get there. And Jesus says, I am the way. I am the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Well, is it fulfilled? Is Isaiah 35 fulfilled? Jesus is saying it is. Jesus is saying, I am the way of holiness that is going to provide everlasting joy for those who follow him. But do we believe this? Is Jesus really the way to everlasting joy? How can this be? You know, a lot of times people look at Christianity as a nuisance, and in some cases maybe we feel as though it's a burden to be a Christian. to be a follower of Jesus. But yet he says, the way he says it is, this is the way to find the access to God and all of his blessings and the joy that he's promising. Listen to his explanation at the end of this teaching. Let's jump over to chapter 6. He's told them, I'm leaving. I'm going to prepare a way for you. I'm going to bring you the Holy Spirit. He's going to enlighten you and instruct you so that you understand this better. But this is what he says in verse 16 of chapter 16. A little while, and you will see me no longer. And again, a little while, and you will see me. So some of his disciples said to one another, what is this that he says to us? A little while, and you will see me, and again, a little while, and you will not see me, and again, a little while, you will see me. And because I am going to the Father. What is he saying? They're saying, what does he mean by a little while? Well, we do not know what he's talking about. You see, they're just frustrated. They don't understand what Jesus is saying. He's got to leave to go to prepare a place for them. He's got to leave, and he's just going to be gone a little while, and then he'll be back. And they don't get it. They don't understand. Remember, he's about to be crucified. He's about to be dead for 3 days, and he's about to be resurrected, but they don't see that. They don't understand that. So here's what Jesus says, verse 19. Jesus knew that they wanted to ask him. So he said to them, is this what you're asking yourselves? What I meant by saying a little while and you will not see me, and again a little while and you will see me? Truly, truly I say to you, you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will be sorrowful, but your sorrow will turn into joy. You see the picture that he is letting them know that he is the way to joy. But that before the joy comes, there will be weeping and there will be suffering at the loss of Jesus. And then he will come back and all their suffering, all their sorrow, all their mourning, while the world is rejoicing, their mourning, all of that will be turned into joy. Then he gives us an illustration. Look at verse 21. It says, when a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world. So also, you have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice. And listen to this. And no one will take your joy from you. See this illustration. I've witnessed two children coming into the world, and this whole experience of going from sorrow and pain in Jenna. I didn't experience the pain and suffering, but I witnessed it. And then the transition from the cry of the baby, all the pain and suffering ending, and all of a sudden there's this beautiful child. It's a human, and it's ours. And it's in the world, and it's here, and it's holding my hand, my finger with its whole hand, and it's just looking at me and staring at me. And there's just so much joy filling my heart and excitement about what the future might hold because this life has been born into the world. If you've had children, you know the feeling. And this illustration hits home with you as he says to his disciples, this is what you're about to experience. It's hard. It's suffering. It's sorrowful. It's lament. But you will rejoice. Your sorrow, your mourning will be turned into joy. What a beautiful illustration that is for us to see. That though these disciples are going to miss him and lose him and think they lost everything, all of a sudden they're going to have him back, and he will be the source of their eternal joy after they receive him back again. Well, what is this? How does this help us? I mean, can we really apply this to ourselves? how does this event resemble the Christian's experience in life? Do you see the parallel? Do you see the relationship, the resemblance? When Jesus is gone, we suffer. I mean, right now, Jesus is not here and we're suffering. He has gone to heaven, ascended at the right hand of God, and He's no longer here, so we suffer. We're not enjoying His presence and feasting and rejoicing at Him being physically here. So there's suffering that goes on. But when He returns, we will have everlasting joy. How amazing is that idea, that picture, that all the things He said will come true. Matthew 6, the picture of laying up treasures in heaven, not on earth. Because up there, all those treasures are kept in store for you. We will experience that. Matthew 13, the parable of the tares. You remember the wheat is gathered into the barn, and those who are the wheat will shine like the sun. The righteous will shine like the sun. We'll have glory. We'll have riches. We'll have treasure. We'll have joy. But most of all, we'll have God with us physically all the time. If you think that you're going to go into heaven and what you're going to see there is endless fishing trips and endless golfing trips and endless shopping trips and endless hobbies or whatever it is you think is so fun in this life, you're mistaken. The joy of heaven is being in the presence of God for all eternity. Revelation 21, that's exactly what he pictures, and it says that God Himself will wipe away every tear from our eye. He'll be there with us, for us, forever. And what a beautiful picture that is, that we have this everlasting joy that we will enter into after this life of suffering and sorrow is over. It's waiting for us. But there's something else in this text in John that I really think we should pay close attention to. Notice what He says to His disciples in verse 22. He says, "So also you have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you." Well, if we know the rest of the New Testament, we know what's going to happen. We know that in reality, these disciples only have Jesus for a little while, 40 days, and then He goes back up into heaven, and then they live without Him. But what He tells them here is, your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. After He ascends into heaven, they live on, and they suffer, and they endure trials. And guess what? They still have joy that no one could ever take away. And so how does that parallel to us? Do we feel joy in the way of holiness? If we have accepted Jesus, if we have decided to follow Jesus, are we experiencing joy now? Well, we're called to. In James chapter 1, verse 2, he said, "Count it all joy, my brethren, when you suffer trials of various types." Oh, what? We've always been like, what is that about? Why would he say that? Why are we called to joy as we're suffering now? And I want to tell you it's because of what we see here in verse 22 of chapter 16 primarily. That the joy is in us right now, because of the hope of Jesus' resurrection and return. So as we think about right now, we need to understand that joy is already ours. But it's a mindset and not a feeling. I know that's kind of hard for us sometimes to wrap our mind around. But joy is a mindset. It's a way of thinking. We tell ourselves the truth about what we have, and we don't let lies come in and steal our joy away. We have the most wonderful thing we could ever have in Jesus. And so our minds must be focused on this truth. And we must have faith in what is promised to us. That we have a reward. That we have fruit that's being born in our suffering. Peter says it like this in 1 Peter chapter 2. He says, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. For this is a gracious thing when, mindful of God, one endures sorrows while suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure? But if when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you might follow in his steps. The way of Christ is the way of suffering, and the way that Peter portrays it is, you're going down that path, you're following the way of holiness, and it's hard, and people around you may be unjust and unmerciful and evil, and you are being gracious to them, and you're suffering on their behalf just as Jesus has suffered for you. Can we find joy in that? That's what we're called to do. That's what we're supposed to do. How do we do that? It hurts. It's terrible to go through tremendous suffering and pain in the injustice of the world, and the trials of the world, and the temptations of the world. To overcome those things is always hard. But if we have the right focus, the right mindset, then we can still have joy. The Hebrew writer says of the Hebrews he's writing to that they went through hard struggles. Sometimes they were publicly exposed and reproached and afflicted. And sometimes they were partners with those who were so treated. And they had compassion on the people who were in prison. And it says they joyfully accepted the plundering of their property. They joyfully accepted the plundering of their property. Just imagine. I mean, our society is nowhere near that yet. But it can be very quickly that we are picked out for our faith and our possessions are taken away. Are we going to joyfully accept the plundering of our property for our faith? How? Why would anybody ever do that? Notice what he says. Since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. How could they accept the plundering of their goods joyfully? They have something better. You can take it. You can have it. Whatever it is, go ahead. It's all yours. I've got something even better waiting for me. And it's everlasting. Not like these temporary things. Not like the Jeep Wranglers. Not like the trucks. Not like the campers. Not like the houses. Not like the children. Not like the wife. Not like anything on this earth. This is something that can never be taken away. Can never grow old. Can never lose its satisfaction. This is joyful all the time. These Christians understood that, and they joyfully accepted the suffering because they had faith in the promises that were waiting for them. Jesus as well, he leads the way in this in Hebrews 12, 1 through 12. He says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and run with endurance the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. You see, his focus and his mindset is on the blessings that he knows are already his. That's his mindset. That's his mentality. That's what he cares about. That's what his faith is in. And because of that, he's able to endure the cross, despising the shame, and being seated at the right hand of the throne of God. He knew that there was everlasting joy before him on the other side of the suffering. That the suffering was temporary. Now, as I say this, some people might think, well, okay, so we're supposed to enjoy pain and suffering. I'm not saying be twisted and be looking for pain and suffering. That's not it. That's not the picture at all. And there's certainly understanding that whenever pain and suffering comes on, we'll be grieved by it. and we'll groan over it and wish it wasn't happening to us. But there is a mentality that's supposed to be inside of us that says we cannot be grieved to the point of despair. We cannot let our grief overwhelm us and overtake us and prevent us from having the joy because of what God has done for us and provided for us. Paul says it like this in 2 Corinthians. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. As we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. For we know that if this tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan, longing to put on the heavenly dwelling, if indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked. For while we are still in this tent, we groan, being burdened. Not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee, so that we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we're away from the Lord, for we walk by faith and not by sight. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we're at home or away, we make it our aim to please Him, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what is done in the body. You see the picture of Him seeing the suffering as a light and momentary affliction. And yes, He grieves, and yes, He groans over having to endure it. It's not fun to live in this body anymore, once you know there's a heavenly body that's waiting for you. But He's always of good courage. He does not get to the point of despair, and this man has endured more trials than we even can think about. So we still have joy in our heart. And the circumstances around us and the people around us can't take away that joy. We can give away that joy if we decide to focus in on the trial and the circumstance and the other people. We can give them our joy, but they can't take it away from us. Jesus says this to His disciples in John 16. No one will take your joy from you. In that day, you'll ask nothing of me. Truly, truly, I say to you, whatever you ask of the Father in my name, He will give to you. Until now, you've asked nothing in my name. Ask and you will receive, that your joy may be full. Jesus is providing for us a relationship with the Father that is everlasting and that can never be taken away. And because that relationship can never be taken away, sin can't take it away because Jesus' blood has paid for the sin. People can't take it away because the worst they can do is kill this body that is full of suffering. Nothing can take it away. It's eternal. It's everlasting. And it's available to each and every one of us. So we need to have the right attitude. And it's not easy to have the right attitude. But we need to have the right attitude about our sufferings and about our trials, that we think about these things as just light momentary afflictions, and that we're focused in on the everlasting joy that is promised to us and guaranteed to us if we remain faithful. Jesus is resurrected, and He is with us, and He is for us every step of the way. So we can say what Habakkuk said in Habakkuk 3. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vine, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herds in the stall, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. What a beautiful picture of rejoicing and joy that is being shown to us, that we should have that kind of attitude. It doesn't matter if everything's taken away from us. It doesn't matter if someone mistreats us or someone rebukes us wrongly or is harsh toward us. It doesn't matter if people are hurtful toward us, if they take away what's ours. They inflict us with something. It doesn't matter. It's just light and momentary. We have God. And we have hope of eternal life with Him. So all these little things don't really even mean anything. They're just this little blip on the radar that goes away, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. Because 100 years from now, it really won't matter. And you know what? 1,000 years from now, we won't even remember it. 1,000,000 years from now? No. You see, just small things that we get so focused in on that just don't give us joy, that take away our joy, and they shouldn't. So what are you putting your hope in? What are you putting your faith in? What is your joy in life? Is it empty? Have you come to the same conclusion that I came to? Well, how can we find everlasting joy? Well, I found it in the Word. I was struggling for the first 6 years of being a Christian just because I was trying to put my joy in all these other things. And finally, after pursuing all these other things, I decided to turn my mind and my heart toward God and understanding Him. I turned off the TV. I turned off the video games. I stopped trying to buy a bunch of new stuff. I spent my money. I spent my time. I spent my effort in this. And it was worth every penny, every second. If you haven't found that joy, we want to help you. We want to encourage you to turn to God and put your faith and trust in Him. And we want to help you understand who He is so that you can have the fullness of joy that He offers. If you need to do that this morning, will you please make that decision and begin that walk down the way of holiness? Please come as we stand and as we sing.